Hello, bold ones, and welcome to another episode of Act Bold. Today on the podcast, I have actress and coach Jennifer Preston. Jennifer, actually, we have the good luck to have her coming up. She's going to be teaching a 4-week course with us. So before I go in and mess everything up about her background and all of that, which is very impressive, I might add, I'm just going to talk directly to Jennifer and say, Jennifer, introduce yourself to our lovely listeners. First of all, welcome, welcome. Thank you for doing
Thank you so
this.
much. It's lovely to see you today,
Yes.
Hannah. How are you?
Yeah. I'm very good. Hot.
Good.
It's very warm.
Yes,
It's
yes.
very
It's
warm.
pretty
Yeah.
warm here
Yeah.
too. Thank you. And
Yeah.
and it's lovely of you to have me here and to meet your listeners. I was actually a child actor. I'm half American, half British. You're hearing my British tones today. But as I explained to you the other day, it's like a switch in my brain. So I switch from American to British pretty easily. But now I'm living in London and my husband is British and my kids are British. They find it strange if I speak in any other way. But I started off,
Understandable.
yeah, I started off with stage. I did professional stage from the age of 14. In fact, I had my junior equity card, which is what you needed in those days to be able to perform. And my very first performance was as Dunyasha in Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard, which was wonderful. And I was directed by a guy from the Royal Shakespeare Company, Bill Wilkinson. And that was an amazing experience. And I knew at that stage that I really wanted to pursue theatre. But I didn't come from a family or a background that was necessarily theatrical or we had any contacts. So although I played around with the idea of going to drama school, which was the route for me at that time, and I was all prepped to do it, I decided instead to go and study law of all things. So I took a bit of a
Oh, wow.
detour
Good for you.
at that
Yeah.
stage. Yeah, so I'd done about,
I think that can be helpful, though, to understand life from a different perspective and to have sort of a different background, and it also certainly gives you an edge when it comes to Law and Order type shows.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd done theatre for about 8 years at that point, so I had a good foundation, and I carried on acting, and I carried on taking classes, and I did actually end up going to drama school in the end, the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in London, for a year, and as a result, I managed to sort of catch up on some of that technical grounding, particularly around screen that I hadn't had before.
Yeah.
But
Did you find that they did? I know I have a question for you. Did they focus on that during acting school? Because I found I don't know when you went to acting school. I went like 30 years ago. Screen never came up. Never came up. Obviously I was born in the television age and the
yeah,
screen age, but it never was part of my training whatsoever.
the training that I did in London was very stage centric. I'd say there was about
Yeah.
10% that was focused on screen, which was useful, but it was really
No,
about
that's good. Yeah.
how different it was to theatre. The main foundation that I got was when I was living in Prague, and I was able to attend evening classes with a guy, David Steskal, a Czech
Yeah,
guy
I know him.
who you do,
I do.
and
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Yeah, he's a great guy, and he has his own acting school in Prague, and he was at the Prague International Film School at the time. So I took classes there, and I also got involved in a lot of their film, and that was a great way to understand the differences between theatre and film. So I think the year of doing that was really good for me to understand those key different skills because they're so different.
Absolutely.
I think having a basis in theatrical work is always very useful. The script analysis that you do, the understanding of the character development, but it's a way that you project yourself in the theatre, and you show everything is just completely opposite when you get on screen. It has to all be, internalized and in the mind, and then sort of explode out if it needs to because of very high stakes or very high emotion. But I think what brought me back into this career was that I ended up in a human resources sort of role in the corporate world. And my main interest took me into training and development, media training of senior executives, for public announcements, etc. So preparing people for influencing on various different types of media, at conferences with thousands of people or on TV. And so as I was doing that, I just thought, why don't I get back into the thing that I loved most? I actually retrained as a coach. I wanted to be an executive coach. I wanted to be able to coach people in media. I wanted to be able to use my coaching to help people find whatever the blocks were, counter those. And then that is a really nice segue into what you and I are embarking on, which is sharing some of those skills. And as you know, I've got quite a lot of teaching experience through mixing networks, because not only do I attend their classes regularly and, have only good things to say about them, I also often teach the classes, the level 3 classes. And it's taught me so much as an actor, but also as a coach. And it's really, really enjoyable to be able to share that. And whenever I do teach, it tends to go down really well. So that's why I'd like to do it again.
Yeah. Well, we're super excited to have you. I know also firsthand how wonderful the mixing network system is. So maybe let's start with that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how a workshop with you will work?
Yes. So obviously we're doing it via Zoom because we want to be as flexible as possible and as far a reach as possible. And I think it is a good format because what we're able to do is send out some slides. We talked about this maybe 5 days before, maybe sooner than that, because it's
And let me just interject here. Yeah, exactly. Because it's meant to reflect the real life situation of how you would receive your sides. And sometimes you get a lot of time to go over the script and sometimes you don't. So we won't ever give you less than 24 hours or less than 48 hours, but any time between 5 days and 48 hours is fair play.
Yes. And you get that scene onto a self-tape, also practicing the skills that you would, perhaps you're already doing self-tape auditions, perhaps it's something that's new to you. What's going to be lovely about this format is it really doesn't matter if you're at a very advanced level or if you're more of an intermediate level or if you're still working on some of the more foundation level. There's going to be something for everybody. We are going to watch all of those tapes during the session, and you're going to be asked to self-critique. This is a really important skill. I've discussed this in the past, that watching yourself on screen, at first, you start to get distracted by what you look like or how you sound. But when you get over that, you have to start really analyzing in detail exactly how authentic and believable you are. Are you moving too much? Is your vocal range too extreme? Volume levels, are you lit well? Some of the technical aspects. But I think what's wonderful is that you can really look at some of the nuanced acting that takes place on screen and understand, whether you could make it more interesting, whether you could make it more intimate, more believable. And I love that. So getting people to practice their self-critiquing, really important. And that's something that, some people are going to be very happy to do. Other people, I will sort of coach them through it. Then I'm going to give them some pointers, and I tend to give really detailed feedback, and I really try and give people some golden nuggets to take away. So I'm always very positive, encouraging, because being an actor is hard, right? And you get rejected every day. But I've been to lots of workshops where people just tell you nice things, and you go away going, "Oh, that's nice." And if it's a casting director who you really want to impress, of course you just want to hear nice things, but also, really to improve. And we all need to improve all the time to be our best selves. Even some of the top LA actors are still going to class or still working with a coach.
Some, I would say probably not. If they're working actors, they're going to classes.
Right? Yeah, because they have to, because even the style of acting is changing, and both on the American side of things and the European side of things, we are looking for people to be more and more believable, almost as if we're a fly on the wall watching something, being drawn into the intimacy of their everyday life or their drama or whatever is happening. And that's what we want now as audiences, as modern audiences. So it has to be even more subtle and more nuanced. But we also need to see all of those stakes and that emotion and that struggle and where the drama actually is. So it's really exciting times to be an actor, I think. But it does mean that you need to continually get feedback or watch your own work and feedback to yourself and keep tweaking things. I talk about it often as dials, so you just need to dial this bit up and dial this bit down. Some people who are very theatrical often have to dial their whole performance down because they're just projecting and showing too much. And then other times somebody is giving the most beautiful, naturalistic, conversational performance, but we don't have the stakes. So they need to dial up the emotion in certain parts of the scene in order to help us to really be convinced that they're going through this and that they are being moved by it in some way. So I think having somebody else's pair of eyes who's very experienced at this, which I am, I can start to say, look, this was a lovely performance in this way, but these are some of the things I think you as an actor need to work on. And I always, as I say, want to give somebody a little golden nugget to take away and be like, okay, so maybe that's what I'd need to do more of. And when you hear other people, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it goes back to that all-important skill of being able to self-critique. And that's really, by attending these kind of classes, that's what you're learning how to do. You are, by osmosis, picking up the skill of critiquing. And you'll also be critiquing the rest of your, the other participants in the workshop. So you'll be constantly switching back and forth between viewing your own performance and having that hat on, and also viewing the other people's performances. And the better, it's obviously easier to neutrally view somebody else's performance than it is to view your own and to see where they could have improved on something or not, or where they really nailed something. It's really easy to see that. But the better you get at identifying that in other people, that skill is going to transfer over to yourself as well.
Absolutely. And also seeing people at different levels in their journey, different stages in their journeys, how I would like to describe it, of their acting journey. So some people will nail it and it'll just be like, well, that was amazing. I could have just watched that on my TV. It was so convincing and that person was so well suited for that part. But there's always something.
Let me ask you, Jennifer. Yeah, I was just going to say, so what would you say to someone like that who is a really adept actor, and maybe it was just the perfect part for them, but they did just nail it, and just for the sake, they're there to learn. So what kind of a thing would you tell them so that they could do it, learn something that they had to take away from it?
As I'm watching, I am writing so many notes. And when somebody has nailed it in one of the sessions, and we all love when that happens, I will go stage by stage through the things that they did, which I think really worked effectively, and what I saw and how it read. Because there will be certain things that they intentionally did, which worked really well, that are very technical. Maybe they, varied the pace. And it was a very sort of steady pace throughout, but then when the emotion came out, they didn't really show it in their face. They just, panicked, and then the pace really increased. Maybe they did it intentionally, or maybe it was coming from an emotional reaction that came below. So I would observe those things and play it back to the person. And then we would talk about some of the choices that they made and possibly some alternative choices that they might want to make in order to either provide a second option. Because if you're not asked specifically to just provide one take and you can see that there is a different way of doing it, why not give them that different take? Not necessarily something wildly different, but just something where, you play with the lines or you play against the lines. And often the first take that you think of, sometimes there's something completely different that could be really interesting. So this is where part 2 really of what we're going to do in this workshop comes into play, which is then I'm going to give them a redirect to try something. So similar to if you're auditioning in the room and the casting director or the director will give you a note or a couple of notes to play out. I think this is a good way of learning how to take direction, because some people just can't. They learn it in a certain way and then they become very rigid, and taking a direction in the room is really difficult. And then the director's going to think, well, on the day, I'm not going to get what I need, because if I need to switch things around, this person doesn't respond. Or it could be that you try this out and it doesn't feel good, but it actually plays out brilliantly well. It might encourage you to just push out some of your boundaries and, try something completely different. I have a
And not
friend of
judge
mine.
it.
Yes, absolutely. Just sort of generating different ways of doing it. Obviously, we're going to use probably one or two scenes rather than a big range of scenes. So we're going to see how different people approach the same scene, or a couple of different scenes. And because of that, we're going to see lots of really interesting choices that we may not have tried to do. And it's not about copying other people's choices. It's about saying, okay, when a casting director sees all of these different scenes play out, they're obviously going to see somebody who really stands out because they owned it. It felt authentic. It was true to them. And that's another thing about trying to find something in the scene that works for you, that's true for you. Because we've talked about this as more mature actors in this beautiful industry. We sometimes get a set of sides for a workshop that doesn't really play to our age. We have a lot more experience, so we'd have to play really naive in order to make that work. So you do have to sort of make tweaks sometimes to material to make it work for you, to play. I don't mean necessarily changing the words, but changing the meanings. So you can be almost saying anything, but something else is going on inside. And I think that's so important, because otherwise you're playing a character that there's someone out there who's going to be that character, and they're going to just do it a lot more authentically. So although we do
Absolutely.
play different to who we at our core are, it does have to make sense for how we look, what we give away for free. That's what I talk about in a casting room, is that we give stuff away for free. So some people come in and they just have a resting bitch face, and they come in and you're just like, oh, okay, ice cold. But actually then they smile and the warmth lights up the room. And it's really interesting because some people just give off, for their bone structure, for their height, for the tone of their voice, a certain kind of set of preconceptions in the first few seconds. And we are judged in the first few seconds. Now, okay, you can do everything you can to fight that, but why? Go with it a little bit, go with some of the stuff that you naturally give off, or understand, if you are going to overcome it, that you're going to have to push a lot more. I've had people, for example, who are very big, tall guys with very deep voices. And in a very emotional scene, they feel they have to shout. And actually, they really don't, because they come into the room and they bring all this strong, vital energy into the room. And that's what they're giving for free. And so all they need to do with the little dials is tweak it up very slightly in order for us to get enough of that in the scene. So things like that really
I
help.
find too, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I also find, I think men generally gravitate towards anger and turning it up, turning the volume up, whereas women will often gravitate towards tears and, that kind of thing, which is
Oh,
interesting,
interesting.
especially, yeah. But yes, absolutely. I talk a lot about primal branding,
Oh, I love that.
working with your inner traits and your outer traits. So the inner traits are the things that are immutable about you, about your personality, your values, your who you are at your essence. But your personality can change on the outside at any rate, depending on your environment, whether you feel shy, whether you feel comfortable, whether you feel in control, whether you're in your element, whether you're out of your element. So all of these things can affect your personality, right? So the
Yes.
personality can be something that is an external trait, as well as the physical, things that are also changeable, right? If you have crooked teeth, you can get them fixed or not. It's a choice what you want to
Mm,
do with that. But my age, I can't change that. I am what I am, and this is something, and all that experience that goes with it, right?
yes.
And of course, people can and do buff up or buff down, whatever you want to call it, like Matthew McConaughey and Dallas Buyers Clubs,
Yes.
Dallas Buyers Club, who lost all that weight. So there are ways to change your physical appearance, which does change your primal branding.
Yeah.
But these are extreme things, right? So, so I think
Yes.
you're right. You're absolutely right. It's very important to be aware of what you, I love how you say what you're giving away for free, because it is so true. You do have these things that, that I always say, whatever you think your flaw is, that is your superpower, because that is the thing that's making you unique,
I
right?
love that.
So a
Yeah.
lot of time, yeah, uh, whatever it is, here in Germany, for me, one of my, little things that I feel insecure about sometimes is my German, because I do speak with an accent. My German is really, really good, but I still speak with an accent. So I do get insecure about it. But on the other hand, I just have to go, well, okay, this is something that's setting me apart. It's making me different.
Yeah,
And either you
absolutely.
like it or you don't. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
it
I
gives you
love that.
something that very few people have. They are not able to create that accent very authentically, whereas that's just something that you have.
Yeah, well, and it goes for so many things. I have another girlfriend here who is a big girl, and she actually started a movement, all bodies in sight. And so to say, look, she says, I'm fat. So that's what it is. I'm fat, and that's how it is, and it is what it is, and
Yeah.
and she's okay with that. But what she's not okay with is being turned into the butt of the joke,
Yeah.
or to made to feel less than. And I love her attitude and the way she refuses to do certain things,
Yeah.
but also takes into consideration, this is how I look. and
Yeah.
and it is a fact of who you are, right? But that doesn't make
Yes.
her any, or anyone else, any less deserving of playing a role that is desirable, or is deserving of love or contempt, or could be the power bitch, or whatever it is. There are so many different things, right? Because
Yeah.
then she's also bringing her inner immutable traits to it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, it's just another dimension that brings interest. Obviously, it's going to be in certain castings, it is going to work really, really well, your physical appearance. And certain castings, they might be a little bit more specific. But there are things that we know. I mean, one of the wonderful actors who I think is fantastic and also a great role model is Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones. He played a part where
absolutely.
they do make reference to his height, but actually, it didn't have to be somebody who had a diminutive height in order to play that. It could have actually been anything, but they used that because he's such an incredible actor and such an incredible personality. And then they wrote some stuff into the script which talked about it.
Did you see him in I Care a Lot?
Oh no, I haven't.
You haven't seen that? It's so good. You have to see that. I think it's still on Netflix with Rosamund Pike
Oh, I will make
and
a
Peter
note of
Dinklage.
that. He is
Oh,
so
it's
wonderful.
so good. He's so wonderful. She's so wonderful in this. She plays this woman who's scamming older people. But it's a great film. I highly recommend it. But again, he did not have to. There was no reason for him to be of any stature. It was not imperative to this role. It was a choice that they
Yes.
went with, and it
Yes.
worked really well. And why shouldn't it?
Yeah, adds
Right?
richness because,
Yeah.
we have so many people of all shapes, sizes, ethnicity, and it just brings something so wonderful to the world that we have this diversity. So why not reflect that in the screen? And, we've made this journey as women throughout the years in the film industry, being seen to play the girl, or the love interest. And for many years, as feminists, we've been battling against that. And now finally, okay, so this character is a woman, but it's not about the fact that this person is a woman. Also, I have a lot of friends in the LGBTQ AI plus community. And they're also saying that as actors, that's something that they like to represent, but they want to be represented as a character who has that sexuality, but that's not the reason that they are playing that role. And I just
Yeah.
think that's wonderful that there is now that flexibility. And these are just dimensions of people's personalities, their sexuality, their race, their gender. I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, I know, especially when I was doing a lot more independent things, which I still do occasionally, but I mean, I think they're a lot of fun. But there were many times when I would apply, I would see a role for a man that I knew I could play, like someone who was in a
Yeah,
high status or something like that. And I would write in and many times get the audition and sometimes get
fantastic.
the role. Why shouldn't it? And it's sometimes just a matter of saying, hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah,
And this is also something I started to do with the German directors and producers and casting directors. Hey, have you thought about casting someone who's not German?
yeah,
Someone who has, because Germany has, just like, England and America, we live in countries that are such, well, people always say a melting pot, but we're really salad bowls, right? Because everybody sort of
yeah,
maintains their own individuality, right?
that's right.
And yet we're all mixed up together, and it's this interesting mix of things. If we just somebody served you a plate of plain old iceberg lettuce with nothing else, how boring is that, right? So what
Agree.
makes a salad great is when you start adding the other things into it. So
Yes.
I want to be, I want to be the toasted pine nuts on the salad.
Yeah. And maybe somebody hadn't even thought of that. And it's the thing that really,
Yeah.
kicks the whole dish off.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of saying it, asking, or putting it out there. And sometimes, maybe I don't want to say this on the podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes it's just sort of subliminally planting that, right? So trying
Yeah.
to almost like a dare. Like, some people just aren't brave enough to make that kind of a casting choice, which is
Yeah.
insinuating that either you're not brave enough or you are brave enough, right?
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of times I find that the younger directors, the younger generation is much more open to it. But of course they're growing up in a different world,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how we're in such a fast moving, evolving industry. It's very exciting.
Yes. Yeah. I'm also very interested to see, I think as AI really starts to take over certain things, authenticity is going to become more important than ever. Showing your flaws, making your flaws your superpowers
Your
are going to be
humanity.
more and your humanity, absolutely,
Yeah.
because that is something a machine will never be able to do. It doesn't have a
No,
soul, and we
no,
are not,
that's right.
you know, we're not attracted to something without a soul. You have to be able to.
No.
This is why we look into a dog's eyes, into a gorilla's eyes, another human being's eyes, and you see that this is something. There is something in there, right?
Yes.
And
I've done a
this
lot
is
of
what
work
we
on,
love.
yeah, I've done a lot of work on video games, and they are so advanced now, and you look at it, and some of the graphics are so realistic, but there's still something in the eyes that just still isn't giving me human emotion. And having talked to the technical specialists, and these guys and girls are so clever, and yet that's something that they still can't quite conquer. So it's interesting, because I think there is definitely a role for AI to play within the industry. I just think
I do
we
too.
obviously, and we're doing this now, with reference to the strikes, we're trying to make sure that everything is in place to protect people on both sides, to ensure that, you know, we preserve the humanity within the film industry as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair that somebody can pay you for a day's wage as an extra and then use your images in perpetuity. That's just not In
Definitely
what
not.
world is that fair, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's things like that where it's like, come on, people, that doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form. The only
no,
person that benefits is you, the conglomeration,
yeah.
So
What worries me is the stuff
yeah.
that's a little bit more subtle than that, is just that you would perform as in a corporate environment, you would be doing maybe lots of training videos, and then they would use that, your characterization and all of the many hours of recording that you've done to then make further training material. So it's kind of, there are some blurred lines in terms of making sure that you really
Mm.
read your contract now and ensure that you're not, the work that you're doing isn't then going to be used in that way, kind of cutting you out really. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But the industry is now shouting about it and people are starting to listen. So I
Yeah.
think we will start to get
Yeah.
hold of that.
So let's get back to self tapes for a minute.
Yes.
So I obviously, because of the time constraints of the workshop, they'll only have a chance to show us their self tape and then
Yes.
have a redirect. So they'll have a chance to do it twice. But what do you think would give them the biggest leg up? If they just went in and had a ball, or if they, because this is what I find in so many, the performances that always knock my socks off are the ones where you can see that somebody's just having a blast. They're not thinking about the rules. They're not trying to get it
Yeah.
right. They're just, they're just doing it, right?
Yeah.
And yet I think as actors we get very caught up in I need to, this needs to be right. I need to get this right. I need to get the lines right. I need to do this right, which I'm
Yeah.
much more irreverent about English than I am about German, but German does trip me up, as I said before. But yeah, well, how do you think that people are going to get the most benefit out of it? Should they just like throw caution to the wind and just go wild and willy with it, or somewhere in between?
When they sit down to self-tape, there should be a freedom. There should be a confidence to own your space, own your choices in terms of the character and what you're going to do with it. Definitely. But you cannot just go and start taping without having done lots and lots of prep. So the way I see it is it's in two parts. You spend time really breaking down what your script is saying and what your characters are saying and who they actually are. Where did they just come from? Where are they just going to? And, what is the environment? Are they somewhere in a coffee shop where they have to slightly speak louder to be heard? Are they in a coffee shop where they don't want anyone to hear them? Or are they just intimately having a conversation between the two of them sat on a sofa, in which case it's very quiet? So things like that are essential. Understanding the arc of the scene as well. Otherwise, we can very often have these lovely naturalistic performances, but they're all one note because actually there's no arc, there's no journey. We don't start in one place, finish in another. There's nothing interesting happening in the scene. We need to know what the stakes are. And are the stakes, sometimes with a supporting character, a day player you might get an audition for, that day player doesn't really have the stakes. They are just there in order to perform a role. I mean, obviously, we're not going to choose sides which, are just expecting, one note all the way through. We are going to provide something with a bit of an arc. But it's really important to identify all of those things and understand, what choices, make choices, be specific. I sometimes say to people, your character should have an opinion about everything they're saying and a reason for everything they're saying. And the other character, and you should really, some people don't learn the other person's part. They maybe record it on an app or they get someone else to read it in for them. And I'm happy for people to do either of those things on the workshop, whatever works for them. But it's important to have someone else on the other side. I think it's important to be familiar with what that other character's saying. Some people choose not to because they want to be surprised and really listen. But I actually think you need to know what your character's opinion is of what this other person's saying. And also kind of at what point the penny drops, if there's something changing. Where is the shift and where is the beat that goes with the understanding and the thought processing? So I do think you have to do all of that. That's quite technical. That's quite controlled. Then you're ready to tape it or you go into the audition room. That is when You have to try and go in with the confidence that you have done all of your prep. You've got this. You know who this character is, and you know what your choices are going to be. And the key is just to try and enjoy. And also, if the reader gives you, not much of a read, maybe react to that. Be frustrated. As a character, be frustrated and, try and get more out of them in the way that you are. If they give you a really interesting read that you weren't expecting, then react to that. But know that you've made all the choices and you've done all your prep, and it's going to have that sort of flow and authenticity in the moment. And I say to people, once you've done all of that prep, try not to tape yourself more than a few times, because it starts to get a little bit... And sometimes when there's something I really, really want to nail, and I'll do it sort of 3, 4, 5 times, and then I'll look back at my first or second take, and that'll be the best one. Maybe I trip up on a line, maybe I trip up on a couple of lines, but that was the one where I really believed me, So that's the one I use.
I always find it's usually my second or my third tape, but I also have a rule of not taping more than 5 times. Whatever I was trying to do, if I couldn't do it in those 5 times, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I'm done.
Yeah.
Or
you have to, if you've been given 5 days to do something and you tape it in the first day because you're in a rush, but you've got an opportunity to retape it, maybe then you can look at it with a completely fresh pair of eyes. Maybe get somebody that you really trust their opinion, and then maybe go back and do it again. But in a session where you're taping, once you've done 3 or 4 takes, unless it's because you slipped up on a line or something, it really isn't going to get better. That kind of spontaneity is going to start to lose. The tiredness is going to get in your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know, some of my most fun self-tapes have been where I've kind of gone off script, which is not, I'm not recommending that. Not everybody loves it. Some people love it, but some people don't. But where I've given myself the freedom to really have fun with it. And then, as you're saying, there's only a certain point of preparation. Obviously, you need to be fully prepared, but then you just kind of have to let it go. And I always find that in the playing of it, I mean, there's one thing in the deciphering of it, in the breaking down the script, that, you make your choices. But sometimes I find that in the playing of it, new choices will come to me, new interpretations will come to me. And sometimes that comes from the person who's doing the reading on the other side, because they have read it in a way that I wasn't expecting, as you say. So it's like, oh, interesting. They've given that line new meaning for me. And because most of my attention is on my own, my own character, as opposed to that character and all the possible different ways. So
I was just going to mention Emma Crompton, who is a casting director who also teaches acting, and she does one-to-one coaching. She's, if you wanted to look her up, she's under the acting feed. I did some one-to-one coaching with her a while back, and she got me to do something very interesting with the script, which is to identify the characteristics of the character. So perhaps in this scene, the person is angry or they're shy, but they could be all of those things throughout the script at different points. To actually have a go at playing the whole scene, but just angry, or playing the whole scene just sad, or playing whatever the characteristics are. That's a really interesting exercise before you learn the lines and get up and play with it, because there was a line in one of these scenes that I did, and I played it angry, and the obvious way would be to play it sad, but playing it angry actually made me cry. Because, sometimes you get those angry tears.
Yes.
And it was so interesting that I was like, I'm going to keep that in because it's so interesting. Because it still serves the scene. Obviously, you don't want to play a whole scene with just one note, like all the way angry. But exploring it in that way with just one type of emotion can kind of bring out some different things, which I think is similar to what you're saying, which is sometimes you kind of play with it and you think, oh, that is a different way of doing it. Comedy, I find especially... the more you get it up on its feet, the more you find where it's funny, and how to land a line properly. Because, comedy is, I think, one of the most challenging things. So that is one of the things that I would say, yeah, you could have a bit of fun with it and play around with it and see, you know, the physicality of it, or, you know, whether props kind of help it or hinder it. Something with a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
business, you do sometimes need to tape yourself doing it in order to see kind of what you can do under the screen, you know, because if you have a gun and you're doing this, yeah, no one's going to buy that. So there are ways of doing it.
Right.
And unless you try it out or somebody's told
Yeah.
you,
You
yeah,
know what's also interesting though, I find here in Germany, you know, in the UK, in America, that, you know, it's a very, it's a tight fit, right? And you can go off a little bit to the side to add some, you know, depth and interest to the scene, or maybe come in a little bit closer, or, you know, take a
yes,
step back, whatever it is. You can do all that to use the frame. Also in German auditions, the same thing, obviously, you can use the frame a lot. But I find that German auditions, they like a bigger frame and they love a prop. You know, so if you're a barkeeper, they get in there and start cleaning some glasses and throw that towel over your shoulder, and they want to
yeah,
see you really. They want to
yeah,
see you like doing it. And you know, I like both. I can see where, if I'm ever unsure, like if it's a very emotional scene and yet there's physicality to it, often I'll do it twice, and once in a real tight close up.
yeah,
So if they wanted that, then there you go. But if you wanted to see it how it would look, you know, cutting in from a medium close up to a close up and that kind of a thing, and what I would do with my body and my hands, you know,
yeah.
then
I
here you
think,
go.
yeah, I agree with that completely. I think that's a really good way to present it. I think, you know, more and more, I'm finding in auditions, I am being asked to dress in a certain way, or, you know, it's okay to use a prop. And they're quite good at indicating that. I mean, most casting directors you work to, I've been on a number of workshops over the years, will say that, you know, using a mobile phone, if you don't have that, it's going to look kind of weird.
Right.
But if you're, you know, supposed to be in the kitchen, right? It's like the gun. I'm back to the gun. You just look slightly crazy. But if you are cooking and you've got, you know, a whole load of things frying and stuff, you don't have to necessarily have the props, because you can be just like, you know, focused on that. Or if you've got
Sure.
a
Yeah.
computer, you can be typing. I mean, it's probably better to actually have the computer there, because you can be hearing the clicks, and, you know, it means your eye level and the motion of tapping isn't like this. You know, it's a bit more realistic. You've got to convince them, however you do it, that you will look convincing on set with the
Yeah.
props or without the props. And sometimes you have to look like busy as a paramedic or a nurse or a doctor, or, you know, a filing clerk. You've got to look busy all the time, because your lines are just throwaway and you're just helping the scene move forward. And they do need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think of you in that role. So you can
Yeah.
help them a little bit by doing that, by providing the business. But I don't think you have to have millions of props to do that, especially if you don't actually
Yeah.
have the props. Because if you, you use something that looks a bit like it, but isn't it, then the casting director is like, what is that? What is that they're
What is
using?
that?
It's very
Yeah.
distracting.
Is that a vacuum cleaner that's supposed to look like
Yeah,
a
is that a
gun?
hose?
Right?
And I have been known
Yeah.
to use that in the past.
Yeah. Well, because it works. Yeah. I find I always try and think of terms of the world, right? So the world of this. So obviously understanding, you know, we don't always have the luxury of knowing the world that we're auditioning for. You do if it's an ongoing series, you know, if you're auditioning for Peaky Blinders, you know the world you're being cast into, or
Mhm.
Westworld, or, you know, any one, Succession, or, you know, Arrested Development. These are all completely, you know, different worlds, right?
Right.
And so like the style of acting from Arrested Development to Succession to Peaky Blinders, right?
Mhm.
So it's the way you would dress, the way you would frame yourself. So I think it's super important to keep those kind of things in mind as well. Like they're trying to find someone that is this missing puzzle piece for their world,
Yeah.
right? That's like, so the easier you can make that job for them, the better.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of roles, especially if you are being taken directly off your show reel or your self-tape, a lot of roles, it will be like, okay, so this person, we can see they can do that. They're just going to rock up on set and they're going to do their bit. That's it. We don't expect to have to do very much with them. So we need to know 100% that they can fit in the world and that they can immediately just do what they do, and we're not going to have to spend too much time on them. Obviously, when you're a lead, it's slightly different. But with these smaller roles that a lot of us working actors are doing,
Sure.
it's really important to be very convincing in that. And I mean, if you look at it as a pyramid, with the bottom of the pyramid being, your hygiene factors, and then the top being really kind of what's going to differentiate you from everybody else in that audition. The basic hygiene factor is, you know your lines, you're not a complete quivering wreck, and you're on tone. So you've done your research. And then, each of the sort of layers in the pyramid is something a little bit more nuanced. And that's, what we work on in these sorts of workshops is, and maybe at the bottom of this big, thick base of the pyramid is also knowing how to do a decent self-tape, getting your lighting correct, framing yourself. But then, you've got these other steps in the middle, which are things like, is there somebody who really is connected to the character? Are they really listening to the other person? Are they moving around too much in their frame? Are they using their props appropriately or not appropriately? Is the tone, the tone is so important though, and none of those other things are going to work if you are too big for the tone. So Peaky Blinders was one of the examples you gave. I mean, they're really sort of like this, and they barely move their mouths when they're talking with their Birmingham accents. And it's brilliant because it draws you into it, and it's just so amazing. But I remember the first time watching it just thinking, oh my God, they're barely moving their faces. And yet someone like Cillian Murphy is just incredible to watch, because
He's
everything is
mesmerizing because of his
so
huge blue
nuanced.
eyes. And
Yeah. And there's so much going on behind them, and he does
Yes.
so much
Yeah.
prep. If you read any of his interviews, he's a very private person. He's not all that forthcoming, but he does spend a lot of time working on the prep. Yeah. And then being completely in the character when he's on set.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see Oppenheimer?
I haven't seen it yet. Now I have watched Barbie.
Oh, okay.
You can see where my priorities lie.
With two boys. You're a mom of two boys.
I know. I have to get my pink girliness from something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was very feminist and empowering.
What did you think? It was. I felt it was fun, but I felt like it was very heavy-handed with the message.
Yeah, I sort of see it rather as being very stylized. I found some of the I found some of the comedy from the heavy-handedness. It kind of made me laugh. It didn't bother me too much. I felt like a lot of the stuff that was heavy-handed was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it was there to work on lots of different levels. I know some people have taken offense.
No offense, no.
Anything to take
Not
offense.
at all.
Some people have. I guess men mainly, but yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and some of it was extremely
That mirror
well
can
done.
be very hard to look into sometimes.
But I didn't think it was about hating on men at all. I felt it was more about people needing to be themselves and find their true selves and being empowered, whether they were a woman or a man. And just being aware.
I loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love the Easter eggs of the different films that she sort of referenced throughout. 2001: Space Odyssey in the beginning, and oh my gosh,
so clever.
Yeah, Zoolander with the funny poses from that thing, right?
Yeah,
all these sort of great sort of movies where you're like, oh, okay, I know that.
yeah. It worked on a lot of levels. It was really good,
Yeah.
and it's bringing people back to the cinema, which is amazing. But I do plan to watch Oppenheimer soon, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I want to see it on the big screen, but I think it will be playing at some of the local independents for quite a long time actually, so I shall catch it.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, this has been such a pleasure, and I'm so looking forward to seeing your workshop and possibly even participating in it. We'll see, time permitting.
I'd love that.
I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that you're going to be doing this.
Me too.
And hopefully everybody got a big takeaway. I think that there were lots of nuggets throughout this conversation that people can take away, whether they have the time and the inclination to take the course or not, about self-taping. If people would like to get a hold of you or be in contact with you, if you would like that, where
Yeah,
should they do that?
probably through Instagram, which is Jennifer K. Preston, because it is an open account and yeah, people direct message me and I'm very happy to be contacted. And yeah,
And you do coaching as well, right?
I
One-on-one,
do, yes,
one-to-one. Right. Okay. I just wanted to throw that in there. And
yes.
you also do a perfect American accent as well as a UK accent, so
I
you can
do,
also help
yes, and
people
I've
with
helped
that
people
as
with
well.
that. Yes, I do lots of different accents actually, but American is the only one, and British that I would coach somebody on because I feel very rooted in those ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
But it's always so
Well,
fantastic to chat to you. I could chat to you for hours and hours and hours, and have done.
absolutely. Ditto. Yes, we have, and I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you so much, Anne.
Well, have a wonderful vacation. I know you're going to Corfu, is it?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Have a wonderful vacation, and I will talk to you when you get back.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that. There was lots and lots there as a takeaway. Until next time, you all stay your bold and beautiful selves. See you soon. Bye bye.